Thank you, George, and welcome from my side as well. So today, the first thing I'd like to do is walk you through application development for mobile devices, basically. And this is the agenda for the first session. A quick overview of the architecture of TD Mobile, a view at the TD Mobile IDE, how you design apps using TD Mobile, talk about bindings, which are kind of the magic glue between an application and the data center, basically. Low-code, database access. Low-code is somehow the new buzzword in application development. Developing applications with just configuring things without actually coding things. Then you probably will feel very familiar if you're a team developer with the REST backend programming. We will talk about device features, including GPS tracking into your application, for example. Talk about web deployment and native app building and deployment. So here's the TD Mobile architecture. Basically, you have an IDE that runs on Windows, 32-bit and 64-bit available. You have the backend, which is based on Microsoft IIS, Microsoft.NET, and some TD Mobile backend services. This includes database access to SQL databases, also to NoSQL databases like the MongoDB that is included in TD Mobile. And you also have access to REST and web services from the backend. Then you can deploy the application to your mobile devices, and we will talk about the deployment parts a little later. There are two ways, basically, web applications and native mobile applications. TD Mobile offers an integrated developer's experience from application design to application coding, back-end coding, application testing, and application deployment. So you interactively design your apps, you develop and configure app events and back-end action, and you test your app and deploy your app using TD Mobile. TD Mobile offers an impressive user interface for intuitive, high usability user experiences. So that was the goal that we have with TD Mobile, and it is actually easy to create applications that serve different screen sizes, either smartphones having different resolutions or tablets, phablets, smartphones, and all these having widely varying resolutions as well. So here's a view at the TD Mobile Visual App Designer. So you have a visual way of designing your apps. You basically drop objects on your mobile phone screen, like data fields, combo boxes, buttons. You have a list view where you get a list of choices that basically allow you to tap on one row and then go into the details of that row. We have business charts, a map control, dialogues, and we also have reports which are compatible to the reports on Team Developer. So basically you can have a TD Mobile app run a report at the back end, for example, process an invoice, send that invoice via email to somebody, or display that invoice on the mobile device itself. All these objects have rich choices of design properties and formatting options. You see the properties tab here on the right, which is currently for a button here. Low-code, data binding, and database access. No coding is required to receive data from the data center and display it on app screens. You can configure database access. There is no need to write SQL or NoSQL queries. You point and click query sources and you do the query definition. On the client side, the coding is low code as well. It's client kind of more configuration, really. You have high-level event actions instead of detailed JavaScript coding. So the entire front end really is HTML5 and JavaScript, but we offer a low-code layer on top of that. And you have very few lines of actions compared to pages of complicated code in JavaScript. So no JavaScript knowledge is required, but if you want, you can write JavaScript, and it can be included and written in TD Mobile if wanted. And here you see that on click event for a push button, and alert would be the same thing as a message box in TD. Confirm would be an alert with a confirm yes no. Invoke invokes a backend operation. JavaScript runs some custom JavaScript you have created. Navigate to a page URL, and then you have if. You can set variables. Switch on menus. Store and restore is for storing data in the browser database. Timer and validate. So few simple things. So here's a look at the TD Mobile IDE. You can see the designer in the background. The IDE itself is ribbon-based like Microsoft Office. You have several ribbon tabs for the outline, for the project, for bindings, settings, and so on. And you will see more during this session here when we work through this. And as in Team Developer, you really have a tree object on the left side that is kind of the application tree, and you have an outline on the right side where you do the actual configuration and coding. What's new in TD Mobile is that you basically have, if you look at the code here for a page, you have a client section and a server section. So you do the client and the server stuff here, and basically the interaction between those two. And the interaction between those two are actually the bindings here. But we will see that very soon. Backend data access. So here's what TD Mobile can do. You have database access, like SQL databases. You can use .NET data providers to talk to databases. You can use OLEDB, ODBC, connecting to these databases here, SQL-based Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, PostgreSQL, and others. NoSQL, we do include MongoDB, and you can access MongoDB right using this low-code database access as well. You have service access. You can call XML web services, and you can call RESTful services that use JSON notation. You have access to the .NET framework on the back end. You can do things like sending emails, reporting, create files on the server. You can do calls to the .NET framework to authenticate to the domain and things like that. So, low-code database access. This first demonstration I'd like to do is a wizard-steered low-code approach. Basically, we start off with just a wizard that will create an app that shows a list of data coming from a table, and that includes editing that data, insert, update, delete, and everything, and all that wizard-driven, and using the low-code data access approach of TD Mobile. So this is TD Mobile. So you see the IDE. It loads opens the design tab. You can define that in the settings if the code should show up first or the layout pane should show up first. On the project tab, you can compile the app. You have a similar thing to Team Developer where you can just quickly test your application. You can publish it to the server, rebuild the application. You have the breakpoint and debugging things that from Team Developer as well. Outline, layout, here you have all the GUI objects, controls, and container objects. We'll discuss those container objects a little bit later. In bindings, you can define rules for bindings. That's something more advanced. And in settings, really, you say what language new pages should be. So TD Mobile includes internationalization. If you want to use that, you can say we basically have two page types, phone and tablet, and you can create screens that look different on a tablet than on a phone if you like. So on a tablet, you might add more controls that don't show up on a phone, for example. Then there's an output path where the compiled application goes. We will look at that later. Server name, so for the server path, that would be the deployment. In my case now, localhost. We don't need to fill that in right now because we don't use that. We also got roles built in, so you can have roles security where you assign to a page what roles can view a page, so basically authentication and user access management. Okay, so now let me think how that is working. New page. I need to create a new data page. Okay, so now I haven't done this for a while. So I think the first thing I need to do is create a connection. So I go to the Connections tab here and press plus, and then I can create a connection, for example, to SQL base. And then I get the settings dialog, and I set it to SQL, and then SQL base. And here's the connection string. That should be all good. And this is really all I need to do to connect to a database here. So I have that connection. Now I go to classes, and in classes I can basically create a UDV from a database connection. That's what I'm doing now. I'm creating a data class from a connection. So give that a name, class company, for example. Connection SQL base, that's the one I just defined. And then here I choose the database table, so it connects to the database using the connection string that I just provided. And I choose the table. And now here I can switch on and off columns to my liking. Terms, line, facts, still using facts, corporate URL. So just reduce it a bit. I need company ID. You see that here's an ID column, so I can select multiple columns to be part of the ID column, so the system knows how to do the updates and deletes. So now I've created this class company, and now I should be able to create a data page. And it wants me to select a class, page type, list page, and detail page, and edit page. So now I can choose the fields that should go on the main data page and on the list view. And I can also define how many rows the list view should display, so that you will see that in a minute. That's not too important for the moment. But the data connection here is connection SQL base, and if I provide the data connection and say go, then it really creates that application for me now. And you see that it has created this page class company, this page company detail. There's a company edit page here, and a company list page. And now what I have to do is to make this work. Now I can go in here and change this, change the caption, and maybe save all this. To a new folder. This takes ages on my computer, I don't know why. Sample. Okay, so now I've saved this, and I should be able, what I need to do is define the default page, which should be class company list, which hosts a list of company. And you see I can provide a login page, a not authorized page. We don't need that at the moment for the time being. And if I press go, it will actually compile or create the front end part and the back end part, compile it and run it with IIS Express, so I can quickly test it in a web browser if what I've programmed is working. So, and you see, this is basically what I've coded. I'm getting the 2 lines in that per list row here. I can scroll through that, and that of course adapts to the screen size. So I think Firefox has these developer tools now as well. If you switch to screen sizes, you can choose the different mobile devices and resolutions and stuff, and make that look like the mobile device you are developing for, or one of the mobile devices you are developing for. And now if you click on one of these companies here, you will be able to edit this. Fashion outlet, super discount, or whatever. Save this, and if you go back to the main page, you see I chose a name that would fill over, but that's saved to the database. Also, all the data access has been added, and this would now also work on a mobile phone. So you can create applications for browsers, mobile phones, plus you will see that at the end we will create something similar for a natively compiled application for an Android device. And now let's look a bit at the code behind this here. Stop the debugging mode here, and if you look at the class company list, right? So on the client, you have bindings, and the bindings are kind of client-side variables that are being automatically filled. There's a class company binding, which is a single instance, so one element of class company which contains these fields here. And there is an array of this class company array. On page events, on create, you see there's an invoke, and this invoke calls the backend operation, which is defined here under the server part. And there are a number of operations here probably. Oh no, there's one operation, because it just reads data. And below operations, there's 2 types of operations. There are data operations, and that's the low-code part I mentioned that this wizard is using. And here, in this low-code data operation, you really just provide the connection string, so the name of the connection string, what kind of data action you want to do. Browse is to select multiple rows, read is to select one row, edit, add, delete are self-explanatory. And you have a data class binding. That means the return values coming from that operation will go into this bind variable here, class company array, which is defined here. And this definition here, this data class binding, and this here will make sure that the data arrives at the client without you needing to code anything. And now, if you look at the layout of the phone here, we have these fields here, and in the properties, there's a very important section here, other than all the font size, colors, justification, stuff that you can use to modify your layout. You have this value bind, and this value bind is basically this class company array binding the city member of it. And for each of those fields, you just bind those to one of these array members. And that's how the data gets into the display fields. And if you look at the edit screen, then you see data fields here, and there's basically the same thing here. You have a value bind, and class company.city. So in this case, it's not the array, because at the end, we want to send basically one row of data back to the backend with the updated data, for example. And if we look at this page, if we look at the back end, there's a data operation for add company, edit company, and get company for one row. So edit company would be the update, and again, you see it's just providing the connection string, the action you want to do, which is edit in this case, update, and the data binding class company, which glues the data fields to this class, and this will be passed to that operation automatically. So this is an overview of how the binding and the low-code data operations work with TD Mobile. Rapidly code your own data access operations. I don't think I really want to demo that again because you saw how that works here. TD Mobile also has access to the REST API that we introduced in Team Developer. Actually, the next talk is going to be about Team Developer REST API, and this same REST API is available in TD Mobile. There are two easy-to-use functions for the HTTP GET, POST, PUT, and DELETE. The nice thing...
Do you want to have any questions after?
Yeah, let's not switch to this one yet. Let's reference that. So you have automatic serialization of JSON strings into UDVs and vice versa, so you don't need to code that yourself, which could be a pretty tedious task. And it can also be used to deserialize JSON provided with a variable. Just a side note. So mapping JSON to UDVs. There are a few things that you need to be careful with. UDV member names need to match JSON object names. And if you look at the JSON of a RESTful service, the reply from a RESTful service, then you see that many times there's an object definition name here. So that's the name of the object. In this case, it's called D. And this then needs to be defined in TD Mobile in a functional class as an instance variable. And the class company is actually the data here, which then is the data that comes from here below. So that encoding makes sure that TD Mobile and Team Developer basically understand the JSON and can match up JSON and UDVs. So GeoCity is receiving data from a REST service. Let's move to that sample. So let's have a look first, and then we look at the code. So this is retrieving the data now from a public JSON REST service, basically geo names. You have to sign up for that, and but basically it's a list of cities with several details about the city, like the Wikipedia URL, the English Wikipedia URL, and the latitude and longitude for the city. And actually this application now has retrieved the data via JSON, and in this application, I can show you the map control now. All these cities can be included onto a map, and these map markers being defined. Let's see if we can. I don't see Australia here, so there are no entries for Australia. Let's use Japan, and this here, this Wikipedia link you provide in your coding as well. So you can open the Wikipedia page for Tokyo. So now let's look at the code for this. In GeoCities, that's where the REST API is being called. There's an operation getCities. It returns something, and it returns an array of class GeoCity, and the binding is GeoCities. And if you look here at the definition of GeoCities, then you see there's this name, a country code, Wikipedia URL, population, longitude, and latitude. And now here in the backend code, you see that it's basically team developer code. We're using teamdeveloper.net to compile this. And there's a call to style JSON deserialize UDV, which basically calls this URL here, http api.geonames.org. And it provides a range of, a localization range. I don't know exactly how that is being defined, but you can basically a rectangle area on the earth for that you want to have the data. And now this URL call will then be taken, and the data will be put into this UDV here, GeoCities. The GeoCities should be defined here, class GeoCities. This? No. Oh, actually the array. So it's filling an array of GeoCities, and then at the end, it's returning the local GeoCities to the client. That's how you pass the data then to the client. And let's just open this one here in a browser. If you open the REST call in the browser here, you get back the JSON. And last time I did this, it takes a while for Firefox to recognize that it's JSON, and then it reformats it into formatted JSON. So you basically see geonames is the kind of the variable name for all these. Then there's row 0, row 1, row 2, and data is coming from the, that's how the data is encoded when it's coming back from the JSON service. And then in that code, I also have a loop where I'm adding, you see, the URL that comes back for the Wikipedia entry misses the HTTP :// part, and I'm adding that in a loop here. So pretty easy stuff, but that's how you call REST services from TD Mobile. Another example where you use all the HTTP verbs, so that was just for reading data. That's TD Mobile apps. So Mongo REST, basically the Mongo NoSQL DB is installed on my machine, and this one has a JSON provider installed where I can call update, insert, and delete. And now you see TD Mobile with a tablet screen here defined as the main page. And in that on that tablet screen, I do have that table control that we recently introduced, including editable cells. So you can basically display a list of rows from the back end and have the user tap into a cell, update the value, and then update the value in the back end. Now let's run this first. So again, you get an idea. And this basically will then also be the application that we later deploy to the as a native application to the Android device. Did I click this? Oh yeah, it's compiling. Starting IIS, bring the browser in front, and here's the application. Now it's firing off the JSON call on the back end and transmitting the data to the client. And you see now the full table control in this case, where you have editable cells. I can save this and reload those. So you can see that this change has been saved in the database. And all these operations like update, read the data, delete rows when you click here, add new rows, all these are REST calls on the back end. So that's the specifics of this column, of this application here. Let's check the source code here. So they're basically operations for update company, delete company, insert company, and read company. So this is the easiest one. That's like the sample we had before. There in actions, there's one called to zal.json, deserialize UDV, and then this is the URL of the JSON web service on my machine here. So basically, you tell the database is listening on port 3000. This is the database, and this is the table that you want to get. If you look into update, then I need to do some massaging of the data, because the data object for update is a little bit different, because there's a separate in NoSQL, there's a separate ID column that I need to handle. So basically what happens is, again, and you see now that I have HTTP put here, which is for updates, and the data from this UDV is being sent to this URL here. And database island, table company, plus the ID concatenated to it, that the ID of the row that needs to be updated. So that's how that works. And delete, you will see HTTP delete here. And again, there's this company ID here, so this database knows what row to delete. And for insert, HTTP post, so full access to all the insert, update, delete functionality in JSON or in RESTful web services. You can also use XML web services. We had that from the beginning. You can use the built-in web services wizard. You provide the web service URL, which you put into that wizard here, and you generate a .NET class for further use. That's just like with teamdeveloper.net. And you can call the class methods to consume the web service at the end in your backend code. So I do have a sample for that as well. Just need to check where that is. Okay. Mobile apps, web services, periodic system. So this is a public web service again. So in this case, XML web service. And I'm retrieving the atomic number, an element name, symbol, atomic weight, boiling point, ionization potential, electronegativity, whatever that is, atomic radius, melting point density. And let's run this and then look at the code. So that's not a typo, that's really the thing, electro. So what this does is basically fetching a list of available atoms, and this list goes into this drop-down combo box here, and then you choose an element, and then it will go out and retrieve the details for this element using the XML web service. So not a big deal, but it shows you how you can do that. And again, go back to the outline on the server side, operations. So getElements is the method that returns a string array into the binding elements. If you look in the bindings, there's a string elements. It's just an array of strings. And in actions, I'm just calling the web service through the provided methods from the web services wizard. And if you get the element details, then I'm calling the other call, getElements by tag name, and that will get me the details of one element. And you will also see that there is a simple import here. So if you run imported web service, then you have a periodic you get a number of methods that you can then use in your TD mobile app. So these are the web service methods that have been imported: get atomic number, get atomic write, get atoms. And you can use those then right from your TD mobile application. Rapid application development for the back end. Database access, you can do web services and REST services. We saw that. You have access to email via the email library that we also do have in Team Developer. And of course, access to all the features of the Microsoft.NET framework. You can do directory services, authentication, file system access, any type of computing task and algorithms. So anything that .NET can do, you can call from there. Using device features. Mobile devices are kind of interesting things. They can do a lot more than our large laptops that we're used to. They have GPS, camera, email. They can do barcode decoding and things like that. So that from the beginning of TD Mobile, our customers have always asked us quickly to get as much device feature integration as possible into TD Mobile. So they basically wanted to use GPS access. Network reception is pretty important. So in your application, you can find out if you currently have network reception or not. The device orientation, so you can you know if it's landscape or portrait mode. The display type, is it a smartphone or a tablet? And you have app access to email, phone, text messaging, browser URLs. So basically you can provide what you saw, this list control where you have several entries in a list. You can actually put in phone numbers. If somebody taps on the phone number, it will dial that number. If you tap on the email address, it will go into the email and write that, you can write an email. And I think that's valid also for the GPS position, so you can open the Maps app. Camera and image access, you can take photos, upload photos to the back end. You can take a signature, which is pretty important for some of the freight customers that we have, the logistics companies. Some of the logistics companies just want to use a simple mobile device like an Android phone to take the receipt of a package delivery, for example, and you can just with your finger put the signature and confirm you received something. And you have access to a local browser database, so you can store data that in case your device is offline, you can store that data without losing it and sending it to the data center when it's back online. And it's getting really good if you're creating really native apps using the native hybrid mode. Then you can basically do everything that a device can do. you can use the camera to decode barcodes. So the delivery person can decode the barcode on the package, then he has the address data right there. The receiving person can put in the signature, and the clerk can then confirm that the package has been delivered. You get push notifications. Push notifications have become quite important on mobile devices. You can use push. We have, for example, a sales kind of application where a salesperson enters an order from, at a customer side, for example, and then that order gets routed to some internal administration people that have to fulfill that order. And when that order is being processed or when that order is being fulfilled, then the salesperson can get a push notification and telling him, yeah, your order has been processed, or you can get a push notification, your order hasn't been processed because this and that data is missing or something like that. But for push notifications or something else, like, for example, forklift drivers, one other company has created an application for forklift drivers in a warehouse, and they're using push notifications to tell the driver where to go next. You have access to the contacts application, local file system access, where you can create files just like this Team Developer. And each of these devices, Android and iOS, do actually have a database on it, a SQL database, which is called SQLite, that you can use. So that's something more safe than using the browser database. So you can, if you create applications that should work nicely in offline mode, then you should really create native hybrid apps and use the SQLite database to store local data if you are offline. You can do emailing, social sharing, geofencing, batch notifications. Batch notifications is like on the email app, that little red circle with a number in it. Action sheets are kind of little menus that come up from the bottom. Toast messages are little notifications that show up for a few seconds. Reminders, calendar events, and a lot more. On Apple devices, you can use. Okay, thank you. On Apple devices, you can also use the Touch ID authentication. So application deployment, the last few things. In web deployment, you basically saw this now with the IIS Express demo mode. You have the IDE, and then the devices will go through IIS, and the IIS will serve the pages and will serve the backend logic. That's for web deployment. There's a sample I need to show you. That's really cool, even if it takes a little bit longer. We might talk less. To mobile apps. Staging production. So this is actually a feature that was built, that customer requested actually. Let's run it. So in TD Mobile, you basically have, if you develop and deploy, you have two modes. You have that kind of test mode that I'm using now, which is using the IIS Express, and then there's the deployed mode when I'm using IIS as the backend. And you can have variables and connection strings defined in the application, and you can tell the system what values to use for testing and what value to use for deployment. So you can switch between those without changing your applications or without touching your applications. So nice configuration management. And now in this case, you see we are in test mode, and the customer database, those are just examples here. And the most important thing is this one, localhost, and then this port number that tells you that we are using IIS Express. And if I now switch here to the deployed version, which is now calling the IIS, the full IIS on my machine, so you see there's no port here anymore. It's just calling localhost app configuration, and the values have changed. So this is how you can configure your applications for testing and deployment. And now, the biggest thing really, native application building. What you need to do this is you need the platform development and deployment kit installed. For Android, you need the Android SDK, which I have installed on my machine. You need a Google developer account for app signing and Play Store access. For iOS, you need an Apple Mac with Apple Xcode to compile, sign, and build the application, and an Apple developer account to be able to deploy apps to the App Store. With Windows Phone and Windows 10, you will need Visual Studio for compiling, app signing, and deployment, and a Windows Store account for app signing and application upload. You might not be using app stores. You might be using mobile device management systems that manage the deployment for your internal users of your organization. Then you won't need those, at least part of those. So the difference in native apps is you still have TD Mobile, you still have IIS and the databases and the services, but you also have the app stores where the users can grab applications, install the native application on these devices. So it can be from an app store, or it can be forced installed from enterprise mobile device management. So you all have the same, I don't know, OpenText or your own applications installed on your mobile device. And then these applications still talk to IIS, but they don't get the GUI from there anymore. They just talk for the back-end operations. So they just talk to get data and do updates, inserts, and things like that. And that's something I'd like to show you now. So this is actually the Mongo application that you've seen before. So there's a table that shows the values. And now I want to get this application onto my mobile device here. It's an Android, an old S4, but doesn't really matter. Now the first thing I'd like to show you are the settings that you need to do. First is this one here. Localhost is my basically the IP address of the well, that's not true. To deploy the services, yeah, and it's not the IP address, it's the location of where the back-end services will be deployed. This is this guy here. And then in this one here, you do have the Cordova build options, and there you can switch on Cordova build, which means hybrid native apps. And here's this important thing here now. The publish app URL. This is currently the URL that my laptop has in the OpenText network, so I can access the backend services that are installed on my laptop here. There's a Cordova project directory that is being used where all the project is created. Basically, there will be a lot of source code generated for your mobile device application. You can give that package a name and a version, and select the target platform here, Android, Windows 10, and iOS. And basically, if you go to the project icon then, in compile you do have more options now, not just TD Mobile, but you can now compile to Cordova. And if I do that, then it will compile that application into a native Android application, because I did set it to Android now. Let's do this, and you will see that at the bottom the respective messages will pop up here, and that can take a little bit. It shouldn't take too long because I already created the initial project, so it will just do a modification run, and there are no modifications, so it should really go through pretty quickly. And you see the commands that are being executed: Cordova build Android. And this is now building the native application at the end of this process, there will be an android.apk file, which is the native application for the Android device. And there's just one command that I can then execute from Windows. So that will shortly be done. Oh, see, compile completed successfully. So now it has created that application, and that is in the directory structure that I provided here in the Mongo REST directory. And to make that run on my mobile device now I need to do some more things so that you can see my mobile device. Switch this one to on here. Go into Visor so you can see that. So you need, so there will be an ad in a minute or so because I'm using a free version. And so now on the Windows machine, I open a DOS box for that location here. I don't want Uber. Why is that coming? And the only thing I need to do here is now Cordova run Android. And this will basically copy the application over to the mobile device here and run it on the mobile device. So it's just doing a high-level compile, checking if things have changed. Nothing has changed, so it's now copying it over to the mobile device and installing it on my Android device. And you see what's happening on the Android device now here. And you see that application running, and now it's doing the call of the REST service, which is the data on my computer. And if I go to landscape mode, then it changes to landscape mode. And it has all the features that I've talked about before. So San Francisco, oops. All this even lets me edit here. So I should redo this here. So delete the extra O's and then press save, press reload, and there's no extra O's at the end anymore. So you see we have a working native application now on an Android device. Okay, and that's it for this presentation. Questions?
So just checking to see if there are any questions online. No questions online.
Okay.